Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. We appreciate that you're here. I'm Sharon Morgan, and we are glad to have you on the OKCPS team. Start there. All right, this is the elementary English language arts presentation. We're going to start by giving you an overview of literacy research. And this is the research that informs our Oklahoma academic standards for English language arts. And then we'll talk about the major components of those. And then we're going to end our presentation with discussing the OKCPS curriculum resources that you have available to you to teach to the standards. So I want to introduce myself first. I am Sharon Morgan. There is my contact information at the bottom of this slide. I am the Elementary English Language Arts Coordinator for Oklahoma City Public Schools. Started on June 3rd, 2020. And in the middle of this slide, you will see a picture of my family. Starting at the right is my husband, Jeff, of 25 years. And then there's me next to me going, next to me is my daughter, Kristen. She is 21 years old, and she is a senior at Oklahoma Christian University. She is a marketing and business management major. She takes after her father in that area. And then on the far left of our picture is my youngest daughter, Allie. She is 18 years old. She was a 2020 high school graduate this year, which was an interesting experience. And she is looking forward to going to Oklahoma Christian in the fall of 2020 as a nursing major. And what you don't always see in these pretty pictures is that our daughter Allie had some struggles in school. She's what you would call a bubble kid. Kind of hovered around the middle, usually needed some help, but usually scored just high enough so she didn't get a lot of it. School's been hard. We were really excited about her graduation just because, you know, it's been a struggle and it was a great achievement for her. I have been a parent in a conference where I'm being told that my child is not a great reader and that she struggles, and it's a hard place to be, and it's really you know, fuels my passion for wanting all kids to learn how to read and to look deeper at what some of those issues may be. So there's an introduction to my family. On the left-hand side of that picture are two icons that represent my education experience. So I have an apple with a book. I taught for 18 years in the state of Oklahoma, mostly early elementary. I am certified in early childhood, elementary, national board certified teacher, and a literacy specialist for pre-K through 12. So after those 18 years, I put the state of Oklahoma down there. I've spent the last 4 years at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. In 2016, I became the Director of Early Childhood in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. A couple of years later, Oklahoma received the Oklahoma Striving Readers Comprehensive Literacy Grant, and I moved over to that grant to manage it. That grant provided funding for 28 struggling districts across the state to improve literacy practices from birth through 12th grade. So that was a great experience. I'm very excited to be back in a school district with you all. And to the right of the picture are some personal things. Cookies, chocolate chip cookies are the favorite thing that I make with my girls. And one of the cookies are some of our favorites. And then I know it's a little cliche for the literacy director, but I do love to read. And if I'm by myself, I am usually curled up on my favorite chair reading a book. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'm hoping to get to know more about you all in the coming year. So some things that I would suggest you have for today, paper and pen. I'm going to ask you to just reflect on some things that I'm saying, get yourself a comfortable spot and some snacks. And then take a minute and go to this presentation link. So I have it linked in here. It's bit.ly, and bit.lys are case sensitive. So it's going to be capital OKCPS, lowercase ELEM for elementary, and capital ELA. So if you'll go to that link, you will get all of the presentation slides that I'm going to show you today. And also in the speaker notes that are underneath, those notes that are underneath each slide, I have linked resources to go with each slide. So I know you all are probably getting overwhelmed with information at this point. So I'm hoping that having these slides in this presentation will be a resource that you can go to. What did she talk about at that presentation? Well, here's the slides and you can go look. Or of course you can contact me. If you would like to make your own copy of the slides, you can go to this link and then you can go to the left-hand corner, file, and make a copy, and then you can have your own copy and take notes on it or whatever you need to do. But hopefully this will be a great resource for you. Okay, so our goals today. You all will explore 3 models of literacy research. You'll understand the major components of the Oklahoma Academic Standards for English Language Arts, and you're going to know the curriculum resources that you have available to you to support your instruction. And again, there's that link down the left-hand side, so I'd encourage you to get to the presentation. So we're going to start with literacy research, and I really like to always start with these few slides because it's so important to know the why, or why are we doing this? And also, I feel like literacy instruction, teaching kids how to read and write is very complicated. And these literacy models that I'm going to show you help me put all of that together and give the big picture so that I can understand what I'm doing. So we know that reading is not a natural process. If you have a baby or you're around babies, if babies are surrounded by speech and people talking, they're going to learn how to talk. That's because speech is a natural process where it's not so much for reading. Reading has to be taught. You have to, just explicitly, step by step, teach people how to read. It's just, I can't just be in a room full of books and all of a sudden it comes to me. It doesn't. You have to teach them how. So how do we do this? Well, Goff and Tumner in 1986 created this foundational research called the Simple View of Reading. And this research is really the framework for what we call the science of reading, if you've heard that term. It's been a big topic of conversation. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to take your piece of paper and put these headings on it and just take a few seconds and write down what you feel each one of these 3 means. Okay, so let's start with reading comprehension. Look and see what you wrote. So reading comprehension, this is our goal, the ability to read and obtain meaning from what was read. This is what we want from students. And how do we do that? Well, there's really 2 buckets that lead up to that. The first is decoding. Decoding is recognizing words in text and sounding them out phonemically. So this is where I understand that words are made of sounds, that those sounds match up with letters and spelling patterns. I put those together and I can decode a word. Then we have language comprehension. This is the ability to understand language, which begins orally, understanding the words, how the vocabulary, understanding how words are put together in a sentence, having the background knowledge to understand what's being said. So these are the 3 components of the simple view. Now, the simple view of reading is a multiplication problem. Decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Decoding and language comprehension do not build on one another. They are the product of those 2 is reading comprehension. So let's think about it this way. If a 1 is proficient and a 0 is not proficient, let's look, if I'm proficient in decoding a number 1, but I have no proficiency in language comprehension, 1 times 0 is 0. So I would have no reading comprehension. Let's switch it around. Let's say I have 0 ability to decode, but I'm proficient in language comprehension. 0 times 1, still 0. Think about it. Another way to think about it is, what if I have some of each? So I'm 0.5 in decoding and 0.5 in language comprehension. 0.5 times 0.5 is, 0.25. So actually I would have less reading comprehension if I don't have those. So if I only have a little bit of each. So we just need to think about, the decoding and the language comprehension side and make sure that we're addressing both of those in our literacy instruction. So if you are looking at the presentation, I have some articles and linked in those notes. So if you would like to get more information about the simple view of reading, you can go there. So then we think those are pretty broad categories, right? So I really like this model by Hollis Scarborough. Scarborough's reading rope is what it's called. This image comes from a Zaner Blozier webinar series on the science of reading, and I have linked that webinar series in the notes if you'd like to look. But if you look at this, model, this image here, the simple view of reading is actually on its side on the left. You see that? We have the decoding times language comprehension. But then Scarborough has gone a little deeper and told us what skills it takes to make up those two areas. So let's look at this decoding piece down here first. So we have phonological awareness, decoding, and spelling, and sight recognition. So phonological awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate spoken parts of words, such as syllables, word parts, onset, and rhyme. Under phonological awareness is a term we call phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate individual sounds. So I know that in the word fish, the sounds are fish. There are 3 sounds. I can blend those sounds together, fish. So phonemic and phonological awareness don't have anything to do with letters. They're just the understanding that words are made of sounds. So now we have the decoding and the spelling. So this is where we introduce the letters and the spelling patterns, and those start to, we start to get pathways in our brain where we connect those sounds and those letters and spelling patterns, which is of course called phonics when we match the sounds to the letters. As those two things start to weave together, the phonological awareness and the decoding, we get to sight recognition. Now, when I say sight recognition, I'm not talking about high frequency words or irregular words. I'm talking about words that you know immediately and automatically. So for example, if I took a purple marker and wrote red on the board, even though it's purple, you would know it's red. You can't help but read it. That's automatic sight word recognition. So that's our goal, is that our phonological awareness combines with our decoding skills, makes pathways in our brain, and we get this bank of sight recognition. So like a bank of words where we recognize them by sight is what I meant to say there. Now, in the red, you'll notice over here by the rope, it says it's increasingly automatic. So as we practice those, reading those spelling patterns and the exposure to those, we become automatic. You and I, as proficient readers, we don't have to usually sit down and sound anything out because we've got that down automatically. If you're a K through 2 teacher, you should be spending, I would say at least 20 to 30 minutes as a part of your reading block on decoding. This is when those skills really develop. If you're a 3rd through 5th grade teacher, if you have a struggling student, this is usually where you need to go, is to look back for decoding. It's not always, it could be a language comprehension problem, could be a little bit of both, but lots of times we have to go back to the decoding piece. So down here in the red, these are our decoding skills, and they become increasingly automatic. Now let's look at the top here. The language comprehension skills, we have more of these. So we have background knowledge. So when we read, we're going to have to bring a certain amount of knowledge to that text to really understand it. An example of that is we read a book in our Basil series called Tomas Rivera. It was a great story, and Tomas' family they were migrant workers. The class that I taught, they didn't have much experience with migrant workers or families in that situation. So I had to build that background. I had to talk to them about what that meant and what that lifestyle looked like so that they could really understand the story. So we need to have background knowledge. Vocabulary, you need to understand the meaning of the words. Background knowledge and vocabulary make up a lot, not all of it, but a lot of language comprehension. We want to make sure that we're really building background knowledge and vocabulary. And one way we can do that is making sure that we spend time in our class on science and social studies and content areas, because that's where we're really going to get the knowledge that we need to understand what we read. So then we go down to language structures, and this is the grammar part, understanding the sequence of words, how words work together in a sentence. It's interesting that as students get into older elementary and middle school, A lot of comprehension breakdowns happen at the sentence level. We just don't know how the words work together to make meaning. What do those pronouns refer to? That type of thing. What do these words, what is this adjective describing? Those type of concepts. So grammar, verbal reasoning is the language we use to communicate ideas. So that might be figurative language, similes, metaphors, that different type of language to communicate. And finally, we have literacy knowledge. This is print concepts. So in the early grades, that's just understanding how a book is put together, front, back, pictures, words. As we get older in elementary, this is genres, understanding that this is a fictional book. So we're probably going to see characters and setting and plot, or even text structures. What is the structure of this text? Knowing how that text is created helps us know what we're looking for when we're reading that. So those are language comprehension skills. So I want to give an example of where this might break down from my own life. So when I went to the State Department of Education, hopefully I was a proficient reader and writer, but I did not have very much experience reading law. And part of my job was to talk to people and answer questions about law. So what I had to do is I went to our legal department and just talk with them a little bit about how the law, what it meant, get the vocabulary in the law. If it says shall, you have to do it. If it says may, it's something you don't necessarily have to do. I happen to have a friend who works at the Capitol, and she kind of gave me a Law 101. So I had to learn how it was set up, what was the structure of the text, the vocabulary. And when I got that information, then I was able to read it. Of course, I had the decoding skills I needed, but I didn't have the comprehension. And you'll notice as you look at the rope, these become increasingly strategic because we're never really going to master the language comprehension skills. We're just going to apply them to increasingly complex text. Okay, so the decoding will become automatic. The language comprehension will become strategic. As these weave together, as we see on this rope, it becomes skilled reading, fluent skilled reading, and leads to reading comprehension. So again, if you have this presentation and you want to look in the notes, I've linked several articles in that webinar series if you'd like to get some more information about that. Okay, so now we don't want to just talk about reading. We also want to talk about writing. So just take just a minute and look at these three, maybe take some notes on your paper. Motes and Tolman in 2019 compiled writing research to create the simple view of writing, of course, reflects the simple view of reading. Our goal here is that we have the ability to communicate ideas effectively through writing. Okay, what does it take to do that? Well, foundational writing skills, letter formation, handwriting, typing fluency, spelling, punctuation, word and sentences, spatial organization, those foundational writing skills. And then we have composition skills, topic knowledge, our vocabulary and word choice, sentence formulation, grammar usage, literary forms. And as you might have guessed, this is also a multiplication problem. So foundational skills multiplied by composition equals skilled written expression. And you'll notice how the reading and writing kind of reflect each other in this. Now, I do want to make a note. Writing is hard. It takes some extra skills. So first of all, it takes fine motor skills. You have to have that muscle coordination, especially if you're a younger grade teacher. You might notice that sometimes that's missing, especially in our technology age. So we need to strengthen our hands. In one exercise I did in a PD, we were supposed to take our non-dominant hand, which for me is my left hand, and we're supposed to write a paragraph describing ourselves. Well, even though, again, I'm a proficient reader and writer, I hope, when I was writing with my non-dominant hand, I wasn't very good. I didn't have the muscle coordination, so I didn't write as much. I chose shorter words, easier words, so that I could write them. So same thing happens with our kids. They could have those language skills, but if they don't have the ability to, use their fine motor skills to write or type, it's going to be difficult for them. Also, writing takes a higher level of executive function, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and self-regulation. You have to, plan, set goals, modify your thoughts, edit, revise your wording, monitor your writing and your thoughts as you go along. So it takes a higher level of executive function. So I'm just going to really encourage you to provide frequent writing practice. Writing also helps us process what we know and determine the most important points. So, take time to do short writings, write about what you learned today or in longer pieces. But writing is very important, and it really does help solidify our learning. So we have learned all about some research that hopefully gives you the why of how why we're teaching reading and how we're doing it. So we're going to see how this literacy research has informed the Oklahoma Academic Standards for English Language Arts. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take your piece of paper and split it up or fold it so you have 8 sections. I'm going to talk about the 8 overarching standards. So take that paper, fold it up, make 8 sections. Okay, and if you're on the presentation, you can click on this image or that link right there, and it will take you to the Oklahoma Academic Standards and related resources. You can find, this is our standards booklet. You can also find standards by the grade level. And then there is an Oklahoma curriculum frameworks for ELA. And we're going to talk about that more later, but it gives some more in-depth information about the standards. At some point, you're going to say, I don't really understand what this standard means. And the Oklahoma curriculum frameworks is a great resource for that. Okay, these are the guiding principles for the Oklahoma Academic Standards. So first is clarity. The standards are statements that indicate what students must demonstrate and to what depth. So we need to have goals. What exactly do we want our kids to learn? That's one of the reasons for the Oklahoma Academic Standards. And also coherence. So the standards include a pre-K through 12th grade vertical alignment. So skills build on each other. And there are 8 overarching standards that are consistent throughout the grade levels. And we're going to talk about each one of the 8. And so that's why I want you to have your piece of paper ready. And then the purpose. There are 4 points under the purpose. First, that learners hear the voices of their heritage in literature and are able to use their own voice. That learners become independent readers in a variety of disciplines, and learners become independent writers for a variety of audiences and purposes. And learners possess the communication skills needed to be informed citizens. So these are the guiding principles for why we have our Oklahoma Academic Standards. And when you look at the standards, you're going to see standards and you're going to see standard objectives. So there are 8 overarching college and career-ready English arts standards that are consistent throughout the grade level. And then there are the standard objectives, and under each one of these 8 overarching standards, you're going to have your own grade level specific goals and objectives. So just want to make a distinction there. We're going to be talking about the 8 overarching, but please you need to go into the standards and look at what the goals are for your grade level. So every standard, all of the 8 include a reading and a writing strand with standard objectives delineated by grade level. Reading instruction supports the development of writing, and writing supports the development and refinement of reading skills. And thinking back to that simple view of reading and simple view of writing, those build on one another. As we look at the Oklahoma Academic Standards, we want to think about reading as the input and writing as the output. So when I'm learning something like characters and story elements, I'm reading it and learning it, and then I'm going to use that information when I'm writing. When you open the Oklahoma Academic Standards, you're going to see a page that looks like this, just a sample page. So the blue across the top there is the overarching Oklahoma College and Career Ready Standards. So one of the 8, this one happens to be speaking and listening. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the reading and writing strand. And remember, we're going to see a reading and writing strand at every single one of those standards. Then you're going to see the vertical grade level progression. So in this particular page, it's 5th, 6th, and 7th. I really do like how that's laid out, so you can see what comes before and what comes after and where your instruction should be situated. And then we have those standard objectives, so what you should teach in your particular grade level. And then we have the standard code. So that code right there is circled in orange. The first number is the grade. So this happens to be 6th grade. And then the next number is the standard number. So we're in number 1, speaking and listening. So that comes next. This is the writing strand. So it's got a W. And then number 2 is the number of the objective. So it's grade level, the overarching standard number. It's an R for reading, W for writing, and then the objective. Okay, so get those pieces of paper out, and we're going to talk about each one of those overarching objectives. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just as I go over one, put the name of the objective in one of those boxes, do maybe a 1-sentence summary and a little image to help you remember. So our first standard is speaking and listening. So on the left-hand side, there's the overarching standard. Then we'll talk about the reading and writing strands under that standard. So the overarching standard is students will speak and listen effectively in a variety of situations, including but not limited to response to reading and writing. So this is about expressive and receptive language, those oral language skills. On the reading side, students will develop and apply effective communication skills through active speaking and listening. Sounds simple, right? But we know that speaking and listening, actively listening, is hard. It's hard for all of us, even adults. So it's really about, having collaborative discussions about text, listening, speaking, asking questions. On the writing side, students will develop and apply effective communication skills through speaking and active listening to create individual and group projects and presentations. So in this one, we're speaking to a group. How do we do that? What's appropriate? What do we say? How can we be coherent when we do that? Instruction might include things like think, pair, share, book talks, literature circles, collaborative discussions, sharing times, anything where we're speaking and we're listening. Okay, so now in the next box, we're going to talk about standard number 2. You'll need to take the next box and cut it in half because standard 2 actually has 2 different pieces to it. So standard 2, reading foundations, the overarching standard is that students will develop foundational skills for future reading success by working with sounds, letters, and text. Okay, I'm hoping that the simple view of reading and the reading rope, we're starting to make some connections there. This is the decoding side of that. Now, it's kind of a small piece of our standards, but it is a very important piece. We will have to have this decoding or we're not going to be proficient readers. So this particular standard, again, is about the decoding. It is made up of phonological awareness, print concepts, phonics and word study, and fluency. So as I mentioned before, phonological awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate the spoken parts of words like syllables, onset and rhyme, and phonemes. Phonemic awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. Phonemic and phonological awareness are oral activities and are not linked with letters. Phonemic awareness, the ability to understand individual sounds, is highly correlated with proficient readers. So as part of an alphabetic system of writing, we have to know that words are made up of sounds. Print concepts include skills such as book handling and understanding that printed materials provide information and tell stories. Phonics and word study includes decoding and word analysis. A majority of students that struggle with reading have difficulty in this area. So again, pre-K through 2, you're going to spend, or K through 2, you're going to spend a lot of time, I think, in your classroom really talking about decoding and spelling patterns, reading decodable text. In 3 through 5, you're going to continue with that in advanced ways and in multisyllabic words. And if you have struggling readers, I would come back to this space and make sure that they can decode. All of those things, as we talked about in Scarborough's Rope, as we understand the phonological piece and the phonics and the word study and the letters, we become fluent. Fluency means the ability to read smoothly, accurately, and with expression that results in comprehension. Fluency does not simply mean to read quickly. It means I have a rate and expression that makes us comprehend. So it is very important that when we're doing decoding instruction, that it is explicit, systematic, and sequential. So what that means is explicit. You're clearly stating what the learning target is. Now, you see, I have an early childhood background. I love discovery and play and all of those. There's not really a lot of place for that in phonics instruction. In phonics instruction, I need to explicitly say, we are learning about the digraph CH. It says ch in words. Then I'm going to follow the I do, we do, you do gradual release model. I'm going to model it. I'm going to work with my students and do it together. Then I'm going to give them time to practice using decodable text, dictation, those types of activities. Phonics instruction should be systematic. So I should have a set of procedures that I use every day for my phonics instruction. And sequential means they need to build on one another from within the year that you teach, and also between grade levels. So this is our decoding piece of standard number 2. So take that little piece of the box there in standard 2, write a little sentence summary, and draw a picture to help you remember what that means. Okay, here's the other piece of standard 2. It's the reading and writing processes. So this is the process of reading and writing. Students will use a variety of recursive reading and writing processes. Recursive means to repeat, to move in and out, back and forth. It's a process. We don't just go in a linear manner necessarily in this. We go back and forth. So on the reading side, students will read and comprehend increasingly complex literacy and informational texts. On the writing side, students will develop and strengthen writing by engaging in a recursive process that includes pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. So what's going to happen in K through 2, we're going to be talking about nonfiction and fiction, sequencing, main idea. In 3 through 5, we're going to do some comparing and contrasting of text to discriminate between genres, understanding the main idea and details, and summarizing and paraphrasing. And then in the writing process, again, you're going to be doing the pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing, which we're hopefully doing all year long, learning that process. Now, if you look again at the presentation, you're going to notice that in the notes, I have a lot of literacy progressions linked. Now, those literacy progressions come from those curriculum frameworks that I talked about earlier. Basically, it takes that literacy topic, like main idea, and it shows how it progresses from pre-K through 12th grade in our Oklahoma academic standards. So I've linked all the ones that are related to the reading writing process as standards. All right, so take just a minute to summarize those standards. We've talked about speaking and listening, and then the 2 parts of standard 2, reading foundation, and the reading writing process. Okay, now we get to standard 3, which is critical reading and writing. We're going to get more in depth and use our critical thinking skills and apply those to reading and writing here. Students will apply critical thinking skills to reading and writing. So I guess I just said that. So on the reading side, students will comprehend, interpret, evaluate, and respond to a variety of complex texts in all genres from a variety of perspectives. So we're going to talk about the author's purpose, the point of view, literary elements. And on the writing side, students will write for varied purposes and audiences in all modes. So when they talk about the modes, we're talking about narrative writing, informational writing, and opinion writing here. Now, critical reading and writing, if I'm a K through 2 teacher, I'm doing a lot of this through read alouds. My students may not be able to read just yet. Some can. If they can, please have them read. So I'm still working with them in small groups with text and getting them into more and more complex text. But since they can't read it, we need to make sure that we're doing read alouds that are at a higher level than what they can read themselves. So they're getting exposed to that vocabulary and those more complex sentence structures. In 3 through 5, hopefully we are reading those grade level texts. I do want to make it an important point here that it is important, especially in 3 through 5, that all students are exposed to grade level text. So we've had a school closure recently. It might be our first instinct to move back to where they would have been had school not closed. So I'm in 3rd grade right now. I want to go back to that end of year 2nd grade. Really what we need to do is we need to be teaching them out of grade level text and filling in the holes. If we look back to research done after Hurricane Katrina, when they had to close schools that made sure that they were teaching their tier 1 was at grade level and filling in gaps did much better than schools that tried to go backwards and start from where they left off and move them up. So make sure they're being exposed to grade level text. Now, if you're thinking, how in the world am I supposed to fill in those gaps? I have 2 links in there in the notes, what makes a complex text and helping students read complex text. Look at those links. So it gives you some ideas on how you can fill in those gaps when students are reading complex text. That's including giving them background knowledge, helping them with vocabulary, chunking the passage or chunking the text. So maybe I'm looking at a paragraph or a page instead of the whole thing. And identifying maybe difficult sections or sentences. Excuse me. Also, Timothy Shanahan, the author, recommends that you give them different types of text. So maybe some shorter, a little bit easier, some longer. Like he describes it like an athlete. An athlete's going to do different types of warm-ups and challenge themselves in different ways. So be looking at that and making sure that our students are looking at grade level complex text. Okay, take just a minute. Summarize what you feel critical reading and writing that standard means. Draw a little picture. And also, if you'll look at the notes, I have a variety of those literacy progressions also linked there, all the ones that are related to standard 3 critical reading and writing. All right, let's hit number 4, vocabulary. Students will expand their working vocabularies to effectively communicate and understand texts. Reading, students will expand academic, domain appropriate grade level vocabularies through reading, word study, and class discussion. And in writing, they're going to apply that knowledge of vocabulary by using descriptive, academic, and domain appropriate abstract and concrete words in their writing. So this is all about the words, the vocabulary, the word meanings. When it talks about the standard talks about word parts, which is suffixes, prefixes, roots, synonyms, antonyms. When we talk about abstract vocabulary, we're talking about words that refer to a feeling, idea, or quality. When we talk about concrete words, these can be sensed using the 5 senses. So things that we can see, touch, feel, taste, hear, or smell. And then when we talk about vocabulary, we talk about it in tiers. These are different than the intervention tiers, but tier 1 vocabulary is that what we would use in common everyday conversation. For most students, you don't have to teach them that, but if you have English learners or students that don't have as much language experience with language, they may need some instruction here. Tier 2 words are words that are more sophisticated, but they go across domains. So I think of a word like estimate. Estimate is more sophisticated than maybe guess, but I can estimate in science, I can estimate in math, I can estimate in different, domains. Words like brilliant and obscure, those types of words, a little more sophisticated, but could be used in different contexts. And then tier 3 words are those that are specific to a domain. So it's just, it would be a science word or a math word. Now, usually in elementary, we will focus more on those tier 2 words, but especially as you get to upper elementary, and if you're departmentalized, you'll want to also talk about those tier 3 words to make sure that students have that vocabulary and background knowledge that it takes to understand their text. I've linked in the notes a video that I love by Daniel Willingham, and it talks about the need for not only decoding, like in the simple view of reading, but also background knowledge, and vocabulary. So if you get a chance, it's a 10-minute video, but it really kind of changed my view on what it takes to learn how to read. There's also a literacy progression on word parts, and some articles about which words should we be teaching, and developing a vocabulary through read alouds for our K through 2 friends listening today. So standard 4 vocabulary, take just a minute. Write that on your piece of paper, a little 1-sentence summary and a picture. Okay, standard 5 is language. This standard has to do with grammar. So students will apply the knowledge of grammar and rhetorical style to reading and writing. So in the reading, we'll apply the knowledge of grammar to analyze and evaluate a variety of texts. And then in writing, they will demonstrate a command of standard English by using grammar mechanics and usage correctly. So this is about punctuation, parts of speech, sentence types, and structures. We do want to encourage you to teach grammar through text. That's and students' own writing. It's much more powerful than just maybe a worksheet or exercises. But this is grammar, and like I said earlier, as students get older, a lot of times comprehension starts to break down because they don't understand how the words are put together in the sentences. So we do need to make sure that students understand parts of speech and the punctuation and different types of sentences. So in the notes, I do have literacy progressions for punctuation, parts of speech, sentence types, and structure. So those will be helpful resources as you're looking at this standard. Okay, take your piece of paper, write some notes there about the language standard, draw a little picture. Okay, standard number 6 is research. Students will engage in inquiry to acquire, refine, and share knowledge. I actually did practice that before and still botched it, but that's okay. Bear with me here. On the reading side, students will comprehend, evaluate, and synthesize resources to acquire and refine knowledge. I mean, how important is that in this day and age where we have so many informational sources coming at us that we evaluate those, synthesize the important points. And also writing. Students will summarize and paraphrase, integrate evidence, and cite sources to create reports, projects, papers, texts, and presentations for multiple purposes. This research standard is a lot about asking good questions and finding answers using sources of information. Covers topics, of course, like citations, research paper, how to use resources, and using text features to gather information. Take just a minute, summarize that on your paper. Standard 7, multimodal literacies. Honestly, you don't want to show preference, but one of my favorites, I think this one can be really a lot of fun. Students will acquire, refine, and share knowledge through a variety of written, oral, visual, digital, nonverbal, and interactive texts. On the reading side, students will evaluate written, oral, visual, and digital texts in order to draw conclusions and analyze arguments. And write, students will create multimodal text to communicate knowledge and develop arguments. So we think about literacy as listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but viewing is also an important part of literacy. We view videos, we look at images. All of those things communicate meaning just like reading and writing. So it's important that we're looking at videos carefully, and what do the images, what kind of meaning does that portray? So some examples of multimodal literacies might be posters, oral presentations, picture books, slideshows, comic strips, blogs, podcasts, videos, performances, digital stories. Here's an example of something that I did in my classroom. We were doing opinion writing and we were writing book reviews. And so what we did was we looked at the book reviews at the end of the Reading Rainbow videos. You know how they have the video and at the end the kids come out and talk about a book. And so we analyzed those little videos. They're very short. We made a little outline of what information the kids in those little book reviews gave us, you know, the title and a funny story and a reason they liked it. We made our own outline, and then I let my students choose their favorite book, write their own book review, and then we used some different apps. They could video. We used an app called Picks. I mean, there's probably, you could use Seesaw recording, different things like that. But think about when we did that, all of the standards really that we hit, they were picking an independent reading book. They were writing for a specific purpose. We talked about the number of sentences and the grammar and all of those things. So multimodal literacies can be a fun part of your literacy instruction. Go ahead and on your piece of paper, write a little summary of multimodal literacies and a picture to help you remember it. And we have come to our last overarching standard, standard number 8. This is the goal of what we do: independent reading and writing. Students will read and write for a variety of purposes, including but not limited to academic and personal, for extended periods of time. We want them to become independent readers and writers. This standard is also about building stamina, that students will read independently for extended periods of time, and they will write independently for extended periods of time for different purposes. Okay, so we have now covered all 8 standards. Make sure on your piece of paper that you have a little summary of those so you don't forget. And remember that you do have this presentation so that you can go back and look at this and look at the linked resources that I have in here. In this particular slide, I have a couple of checklists for your classroom library, just to kind of see, do you have a classroom library that would engage students in independent reading and writing? Okay, so a few points about the academic standards. Students will revisit concepts again and again as they use language at increasingly sophisticated levels. The skills are repeated with an implied expectation that they are attributed to increasingly more complex texts, and we talked about this earlier. So what's going to happen is we're going to summarize, but we won't ever necessarily, we'll just continue to do a summary of more and more complex texts. Because of this recursive learning process, language arts learning does not progress for students in a strictly linear way. So I would love to tell you this is a checklist, and once you get this done, check and you can go to the next one, and that'll work. But usually you have to revisit, come back, do the writing process over and over again. And now I will say, I have a little different view of this statement when I think about decoding skills. Now on decoding skills, those are sequential and they do build on one another. So that part's a little bit different. This is referring a lot to our language comprehension skills that are more strategic, but we do have those automatic decoding skills that come to play when we're teaching reading. The Oklahoma ELA standards are not taught in isolation. Standards can be bundled for educators to develop grade appropriate lessons, tasks, and assessments. So think about it, if we're writing a summary that includes the elements of a story, we may also be talking about using different types of sentences, simple and complex sentences, or you might be talking about using correct punctuation in that summary. So we don't just want you to take one standard and teach it. There's really too many of those. So blend those standards together some so that you can teach rich lessons. Okay, and a couple of just final notes here of things I want you to know that are in the standards. And the standards are linked in on this slide and also in the notes here. But on page 73 of the standards, we have a glossary. So it defines the words that are in the standards, because there's sometimes even I have to look and I'm like, what do they mean exactly? We'll look in the glossary. The 44 phonemes of the English language are on page 88. We have 26 letters, but 44 phonemes or sounds, and page 88 will show you what those are. On page 89, there's genre guidance. So thinking about standard 8, and we're talking about, well, actually several of the standards. Standard 3, critical reading and writing, independent reading. What genres do I need to have in my classroom or teach? that guidance is on page 89 by grade bands. And then finally, there's a grammar companion, page 92 through 105. This helps us out with standard 5 language. It's something I will say I use quite a bit when we're having a discussion about exactly, what the grammar of the sentence. I sometimes have to go and make sure that I know exactly what we're talking about, gives examples and definitions, and it's very helpful. So just make note that those resources are in the Oklahoma Academic Standards. Sometimes we don't go beyond our own grade level. So look at those and use those in your classroom. Okay, so you may be to the point now where you're thinking, oh, so many standards, so little time, how am I going to put this all together? So here at Oklahoma City Public Schools, we're trying to help you by creating OKCPS unit plans. Now, they are linked here on this slide. They will be found if you go to the OKCPS website under Curriculum and Instruction in English Language Arts. You will see the unit plans in there. We have developed them over the course of the spring and the summer. We hope that this will be a great resource for you to know what standards to teach and when. So you're going to have a year at a glance, or what we call the YAGs. The YAGs provide an overview of which skills will be taught which quarter. There are 2 units per quarter, making a total of 8 units. So this is just the overarching view. And you'll notice those standard codes are in there that we talked about earlier in the presentation, that it's got the grade level, the standards, it's a reading or writing strand, and then the objective number. So the YAGs. Then we're going to get to the unit plan. So this is the top of the unit plan, and here are the 8 units that we have. So we have 1A, which is the first 20 days, and Unit B, narrative writing. 2A deals with point of view, text, evidence, and inference, and then 2B is opinion writing. A is author's purpose, and 3B is informative writing. 4A is research, and 4B is research writing. Now, I want to make the point that, like, we've talked a lot about how reading and writing are both very important. We're going to be reading and writing in all of these units, but like reading is the input and writing is the output. So the way they were written is we have a little more focus on the reading standards at the beginning of the quarter and then writing at the end. But I do want you reading and writing obviously throughout all of this, but that's how they were set up. And if you look at the top here, you're going to see that there's the unit title, the time frame, which unit it is, and which grade level, and about how long it will take. Okay, at the top, you're going to have desired results. This is going to break up the standards in some different ways. So we're going to have our anchor standards. The anchor standards are from those 8 overarching standards that we just talked about. It's generally a combination of standards 2, 3, 4, or 5 up there, but just gives you that big idea. Then we're going to have essential standards, and essential standards are the ones that students must know and have mastered by the end of each school year in order to be prepared to enter the next grade level or course. So these are the ones we really do want to focus on, are these essential standards. And then we'll have supporting standards. Those standards are also important, but they again support those essential standards. And then we have reoccurring standards. So these are standards that are going to flow throughout all of the units. So they are standards 1, speaking and listening, because we should be speaking and listening throughout everything we do, turning, talking, discussing, and standard 8, independent reading and writing. We want to see those at all times. Now, for the younger grades, we have also included those decoding skills in standard 2 foundations, because those should also be all the time, should always be happening. So you will see those. And then you'll also find learning targets and cognitive demand. So these are the student will statements, and they've broken down each standard into student will statements for you. Then you're going to see the meaning section. So this section synthesizes the important or core ideas of the unit and really connects it to learning beyond the classroom. Just gives you those big ideas. So you're going to have the standards that you want to teach for that unit, then these big ideas, the enduring understandings and essential questions. Then you're going to have the learning alerts. So in the prior knowledge section, it's going to talk about, what students should have learned at this point, and they may or may not have. So you may have to look back and see what should they have learned. And then we have key vocabulary. So we have taken the vocabulary words that go with the standards we're focusing on for that unit and listed those. We have also linked, you'll notice here, if they're underlined in blue, that they're linked. We've linked the glossary and the Oklahoma Academic Standards. So if you're, and we've starred the vocabulary words that are in there. A few of them weren't, but they were still pretty essential. So if you need to look those up and to know what they mean, you can just click on that glossary and go right to the words. Then we'll have some ideas for differentiation and enrichment for your English learners, SPED, gifted, so that you can reach all learners. And then we'll have some misconceptions. So what are some common misconceptions students have when learning these, when working on these objectives or these standards, sorry. So those are the learning alerts. Then we'll have the learning plan. Now this section will provide a general progression and resources while allowing you to make instructional decisions to meet the needs of your class. Different schools have different resources. So we didn't want to give you a daily, this is what you need to do exactly, but it gives you an idea of how to progress through these standards. You're gonna have some interdisciplinary connections. So how can I apply these skills in my science, social studies, math? Adopted resources. What are some resources that have been adopted, purchased by the district that you can use? And then supplemental resources. So we put links, videos, activities that go with each standard, and everything here should really be organized by standard so that you can supplement if you need something else. So again, this is just a general progression of how to teach the standards in this unit. Now, I do want to mention that these curriculum units are living documents. They are works in progress, like anything in education. A lot of time and thought went into creating them, but we're going to find out when you teach with them what's helpful, maybe what's not so helpful. Is there a better way to format the document? So we will continually be trying to improve these, put in resources that are helpful to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me, or you will have a lead teacher, an instructional coach, principals at your school, and you can talk to them about it as well. And if there's something that you would like to see in here that would be helpful, please let us know, and we will continue to improve these and work with them. So I'm gonna go back. So we talked about how these are linked. So here's the standard code, and throughout the unit plans, the standard code will be linked to the Oklahoma ELA curriculum frameworks. And I want to give you an idea of what this is. Like I said earlier, there's some point where you're going to say, I don't know what they mean by this standard, or what I mean, or maybe you and a colleague are working together and you have different opinions about what that standard means. Go to the Oklahoma ELA curriculum frameworks. It was developed by the State Department of Education to support the implementation of the standards. So when you go to this page, you're going to see this. You can go to your grade level, and we'll do that in just a second to dig into the standard objectives at your grade level. There's standard short videos. They are 3 to 5 minute videos about the overarching standards. So there's one about each one of the 8 and 2 for standard 2 that's split up into 2 pieces. Literacy progressions, and I've referenced those during the presentation. So those progressions take a literacy topic, main idea, theme, something like that. And then they talk about how that progresses through the standards from pre-K through 12. It's a great resource for, if I have a student that's not progressing very well in that area, I could step back. Okay, what should they have? How can I fill in those gaps? Or if you have a child that seems to be ahead of grade level, you can look ahead and see what they will be doing later. So I have linked, you can go here and see all of the progressions. I have linked in this presentation the progressions related to the standards in the slide that I was talking about. Also, here's some engagement strategies. These are great high leverage strategies that you can use in a variety of contexts. So I would say, download those and read them over. They're great engagement strategies. before we get to the grade levels, on the right, you can find the full document for the standards, grade level documents, and then they have Jason Stevenson, who is our state secondary ELA director, and Deb Wade, who is our state elementary ELA director, have created rubrics to help you determine if a text is complex. And then down here under other resources, we have our state comprehensive literacy plan, ELA assessment resources. So if you are a 3rd through 5th grade teacher and you give that state test, and 5th grade teachers for the writing test, there's some great resources in there. Curriculum maps and pacing guides, general routines for instruction. So what are some routines that you can use for vocabulary, for speaking and listening that you would have in your classroom? It's a great resource right there. Portrait of a college and career ready student, lexile measures, and then just the history of the ELA framework. So that's what you're going to find when you go to the frameworks. Now, let's see. If you go to your grade level, so in this one, I went to 2nd grade, you're going to see this. It'll give 2nd grade kind of in a nutshell here in this paragraph. There are family guides that you can give to your families. They are in English and Spanish that talk about what you should see in your grade level, what your classroom teacher will be doing, and what your family can be doing. You can go to your standards. You can see an objective analysis. So those standard objectives, if you go into the objective analysis, we're going to look at that next. It'll give you a breakdown of that standard. Also, the student proficiency levels, that's kind of it's a rubric of developing, can't remember the next, developing, achieving, like, I can't remember that middle one, and proficient, and going beyond. So it gives you a rubric and also some instructional guidance. Here are the progressions once again, and the engagement strategies. So when you are in our OKCPS unit plans, the standard code is linked to this objective analysis, and this is what it looks like. So this happens to be a standard 3, it's 3.3R2. It'll go to this page, and you're going to see, based on that standard objective, what the student's actions are, the teacher actions, some supporting resources, and some insights to help you understand that objective, give you some background knowledge if maybe that's an area that you need some more understanding of. So again, in the unit plans, we've linked the curriculum frameworks for each objective in there. So you have that. Touch. Okay. So we've talked about literacy research. We've talked about the standards and those 8 overarching standards. At OKCPS, we've put those into unit plans so you know which standards to focus on each quarter. Now we want to talk about some of the adopted resources that we have here at OKCPS. So each school has different resources, so please talk to your teammates and your principals. I've pulled out someone that are district-wide adoptions, so you do have access to more, but we're just going to focus on these. So the way you're going to get to that is through Clever. So you're going to go to, and there's a link if you go to this slide. You'll go into Clever, you'll log in through your OKCPS password, and you'll have access to these. So Benchmark is our district adopted literacy curriculum. When you access this through Clever, you're going to find virtual resources. These are ways to create a class, assign books and tasks to students. There's some great little videos in there on how to do that. You'll find a library. So this library has ebooks. You can even go, there's a little gear, you can even get a link. So if you need to get a link to that book to send out to your students, you can do that. There's also interactive teacher resources. Now I want to tell you, you should also have the paper copies and all the books and the benchmark set in your classroom. And if you don't have that, please contact me or talk to your instructional coach, because we do have some extras of those. So you will have print materials. Benchmark has a lot of books with it, a lot of complex text. But when you go to this through Clever, you'll have the online resources. There will be daily lessons. There's phonics in there. We talked about how important that decoding was. For kindergarten, you're going to use Startup Phonics. For 1st grade, Build Up Phonics. 2nd grade, Spiral Up Phonics. And then 3rd through 5th grade has Word Study. So it's more advanced phonics skills. And then there's also a writer's workshop. So ideally, you're doing phonics, you're doing the benchmark lessons, help with comprehension, and then we have a writing workshop that you can use. iStation is our district adopted screener that we will give 3 times a year. There is also a curriculum piece, so you'll give the screener, and then it'll put them into lessons to help them. And there's also downloadable lessons within iStation that you can use that are aligned to student needs. And then new this year, we have Learning A to Z, and we're going to try to continue to put out more professional development with that. But they're online resources, books, literacy stations, as well as classroom management tools. And you can even just put in a topic, author's purpose, whatever we're talking about in those unit plans, and get some ideas. There's lots of books and resources on there. This year, we're also implementing Heggerty Phonemic Awareness for K through 2 teachers. There is no online component. It is just a book that has phonemic awareness exercises, rhyming, blending, segmenting. If you go to this link right here, it gives you a 2-pager about how to implement that, what it is. There's some links to some model lessons that you can watch on YouTube. It's pretty simple to implement, I believe, but it will have a powerful impact, because we talked earlier about how important it was to understand how words are made up of sounds. So again, these are some curriculum resources through OKCPS. You'll go through Clever. Please contact me, your instructional coach, your team lead, and they will show you how to do that and explore these materials to help you in your instruction. Okay, well, I hope that this presentation has been helpful for you. It's giving you the background that you need to teach elementary ELA and literacy in your classroom. You have a number of people to support you. I would ask that you scan this QR code, and there's 5 simple questions. I don't think you're going to have any trouble answering them. And then give me some feedback on this presentation. Was it helpful? What about it? What would you like to know more about? And that will help inform me about what other professional learning I should be providing. So just take just a minute, scan that QR code. Okay, and I want to thank you all for being here today, for being teachers, for being willing to have an impact on kids. I know that our life has been so enriched by the teachers that we've had for my girls, and that I've gotten to work with. And I'm looking forward to you all having that impact on students. So again, thank you. Here is that link to the presentation again, and here is my contact information, Sharon Morgan. And you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful year, and thank you so much for all you do.